I am Laurel Barr. I am the chair of the Early Career Physicians Section, formerly the Young Physicians Section, and we're here to talk about the Early Retirement Section. And I know a lot of people would think that our members won't be part of this section, but it will be our ultimate destination. So we should know what this section is about and what it offers to us now as early career physicians. And we'll talk a little bit about mid-career physicians as well, to get you plugged in place and with their resources. So I am here with Steve Anderson, who is the chair of the section. Would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Stephen Anderson. I was 35 years of emergency medicine in South Seattle. Blah, blah, blah. While I was at my hospital, I did pretty much everything. Chair of education, chair of trauma, chair of cardiac, chair of stroke. I was chair of my department. I was chief of staff. The list goes on and on. I will talk about attendance because that was what I really brought, was I showed up. I was blessed to be my mayor's director of my healthy community. I was physician of the year for the American Heart Association because I recognized that cardiac disease was what was killing most of the people early in my career. I was then dragged into policy and realized that if you wanted to really change the world, advocacy made a difference. And I fought flawed policy in Washington, which got me to be my Washington chapter president. That eventually led to being on the board of directors for ACEP, where I was blessed to be treasurer and chair of the board. And then eventually I now am chair of the naloxone project. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about advocacy at some point in time. Maybe the intro that I really wanted to say is, so how did the Exploring Retirement section come to be? And I can say I always was convinced I wanted to retire at the top of my game on my terms. Before, all my partners kept asking me, well, when are you going to retire? And I always kind of set 65 as this arbitrary number. And when I started to get close to that, I realized that there really wasn't any community for my similar peers to congregate in, to network. And our catchphrase is to remain relevant, because you're going to find out that when you stop defining yourself at the gurney as a clinical physician, you start to realize that you want to still remain relevant. You want to do things that make a difference, but it was hard to find how to do that. So we formed the first member interest group, which is something unique to ACEP, where you get a bunch of people around you that are interested in the same topic. In my case, it was sort of an ACEP Hall of Fame. We had a lot of past presidents, a lot of past chairs of the board. All of them were stepping away from the gurney in clinical work, but they still wanted to be active in ACEP. And so we found out that we all faced a lot of the same similar issues at that age, our health, et cetera, our finances. And so we formed the member interest group that almost immediately had 100 members and became a section. And then and we'll talk about this, I hope, then we formed what are called affinity groups, which were divisions within our section that were specific to things like alternate employment, finances, et cetera. We'll talk about that a little bit. But that's where I'm sitting right now. I don't do clinical anymore, but I still like to remain really active and relevant.
So obviously you've had a very long and distinguished career. You and the other members of the sections, pioneers of emergency medicine, what we can hopefully aspire to. And your core mission really is to create community, pioneer. You were the first member interest group, first affinity groups, first of everything in emergency medicine. How is it that you can help us as early career physicians become what you have become? So tell me a little bit about your core mission.
Okay, well, interestingly, the core mission, as it's defined on our website, basically, is that we formed in order to share our knowledge and experience over the years with physicians that are earlier in their career, to help them learn both from our successes and our mistakes. I may say this more than once. The biggest challenge we have is not telling you how we did it, but asking you how we can help you navigate your careers, because the world is different now than it was. But when we originally all formed ACEP, if you will, we were fighting against colleagues who didn't want to recognize us as a specialty, certainly didn't want us necessarily as chief of staffs and the people that were at the head of the table. And we fought those battles pretty successfully. I'm really proud of that. And I talk about that for a long time. But nowadays, the challenges are a little bit different. It's kind of taking ownership back, and finding ways that you feel like you really have control. And you're not fighting colleagues as much anymore. Now you're fighting corporate control and some other things. And it's a different challenges. But, a lot of what we did learn along the way is still applicable. And that's what we want to do. We want to be there as a resource.
And I think the advocacy battle, from what you're saying, is a little bit different. Before, we were fighting amongst the profession. You have established that we are valuable members of the medical community as a whole. I think early career physicians now feel like it's not battling and doing a boxing match among our colleagues. It almost feels like the floor is falling out from under us. And I think it's really hard to look at it a little bit differently, but I think your section has some valuable insights, both from, the floor perspective and the colleague perspective, which we, still are fighting as well. So let's talk about a little bit of the activities in your section. So how do you help your members engage? How do you get them resources? Or what do you provide for your members and for the rest of the college?
Okay, well, let me start by breaking down my section a little bit. We developed what we called affinity groups because, like I said, we realized that there were a lot of the same things that we wanted to do and we had questions about. For instance, it isn't always someone in your group that's going to take you aside and explain your financial future and what you should be planning for early. And we wanted to know what else were people doing if they walked away from the gurney. Was there alternative options for employment? So our affinity groups are the alternative employment group, the financial planning group. We have networking and well-being. How do we get together? How do we still have fun together? But also our health as you start to approach retirement or get away from the field. It's not just your mental well-being, although that's part of it. It's also how do you stay healthy and the decisions that you make to do that. And then getting back to our core mission is how do you go about doing coaching and mentoring? And I love a colleague of mine, Linda Lawrence, who said there's a difference between coaching and mentoring. Mentoring was telling people how to do it the way you did it. And coaching was finding out where they're coming from and trying to help them navigate to the solutions that are going to work for them. And I think we are trying to learn how to do the latter even better. And the way we do that is by interacting like this.
And I think that's a great point. There is a difference between mentoring and coaching. What I want from a mentor is what opportunities are there? How can you help me? How can you guide me? Whereas a coach is very introspective and they're looking at our problems too. And I think that if the section is able to kind of grasp that and really give a good combination of both, that would be very valuable. And I think we've been working on that lately. We just did a webinar together with the early career physicians in the retirement section. And I think really it's a great opportunity for both sections to learn from each other, and maybe both doing a little coaching and mentoring as things move on. And I also like the way you're integrating both health and financial. I actually started looking into financial aspects of well-being just during the pandemic when things were kind of falling out from under us. And what I love about it is its long-term approach. And the sooner you get on board with that, really the sooner it benefits you. So if you start, running for your heart health when you're 20s and 30s, it's going to benefit you even more than if you start in your 50s and 60s. So really starting on the correct path and building those good foundations is something that you can educate and really help every physician on.
Well, we have webinars, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the successes we've had with our webinars. But I want to get back to real quick just to say my closing statement's going to be the earlier you start planning good behavior, particularly financially, the easier stepping away from the gurney and truly retiring is going to be. I'll quote Greg Henry now, one of our early presidents, where he said, every great beginning needs an exit strategy. And that should start as early as you can. And the one advice that I have is that you should have a financial planner. We encourage people to go to physicians who are educated to find out about their health. All of us in our section would advise you to go to a financial planner whose job is to understand the whole strategies around being financially stable and utilize their expertise. A lot of us like to dabble in things like the market and all that kind of stuff, but that's not how you make a professional future. But we also do webinars around lots of different things. Some of our successes I would like to point out. We did webinars on several of them on our health, where we talked about things like how do you deal with a spouse or a significant other who has dementia? How do you try to navigate your retirement such that you're where you can get the health care you might need as you get older? Because trust me, it's a little different to be in rural Iowa than it is to be in New York City. And that also applies to financially. We did a wonderful webinar that's available that talks about all those things you need to consider financially when you retire, your where you are, how it relates to your ability to interact with your family, but also things like your IRAs, your whether or not you want to be Medicare or Medicare Advantage. There's a lot of different webinars we have that the sooner you listen to them, the more likely you are to make the right decisions moving forward. Because, God, I'm throwing all my pearls right out here, is that our membership is made up a lot of 30 to 40 year career physicians. And our goal is whenever you decide to exit emergency medicine, it should be on your terms when you want. But if you want to make it a long career, we have some pearls and expertise on how to stay in the game.
Yeah, and I think really staying in the game for our generation has to be very intentional. The more I go out and explore burnout and other resources, I think everybody just keeps talking about exit strategy. And I've definitely felt that. There was a slide at ACEP that said the average women emergency physician retires now at age 42, which makes my joke about joining your section next year not really a joke. And I think the pressures that you feel kind of in the end result of finance and health and other things, caring for a spouse with dementia, our generation is the sandwich generation. We might be caring for parents at the same time as caring for children. So we face a little bit different stressors, but there's a whole lot the same. And as far as the end career financial versus the early career, I think student loans and your advice for getting a financial planner, I would add that it needs to be physician specific because the financial challenges we face from medical school student loans have really changed. They're no longer subsidized loans. They accumulate while in residency. You graduate and you have more debt by the time you graduate from residency. Now we're facing problems with the PFSL student loan repayment. Who qualifies? We don't know if that's going to continue. We don't know if income based is going to continue. We face a myriad of troubles. So a little bit different, but kind of similar with similar resources and similar advice is to kind of look for help because we
Well,
definitely need it.
I don't know a lot of colleagues my age who are forced to continue working because they can't exit financially, but I do know them. Things like the fact that you're tied to no tail and you can't afford to buy a tail and things like that. And those are all sort of things that we talk about and we have as resources that we can give. You're going to hear me say more than once, if you don't want to join our section already because you're 32 and just finished your residency or whatever, you should at least listen to us. And I'm already getting to my second point is find somebody in our section who can be a mentor because again, I'll steal my thunder. I'm just going to say it's nice to find somebody who isn't who's enough removed from your situation that you can talk freely to them and not feel like you're going to have repercussions where you're at, but somebody that's actually interested in you and wants to help, and somebody that you pick as opposed to having assigned to you. And our section is loaded with those individuals.
So if we wanted to reach out to you as a section, find a mentor, find someone specific, do you have a process to kind of match our goals with your interests?
Sure. I mean, so the simplest one is if you're, because I'm trying to encourage people to be engaged, show up at LAC, show up at the Scientific Assembly at ACEP 26 or something, and even come to one of our meetings, and we'll walk you to the individual that might be most applicable to answer your question. But we also have chairs of our affinity sections. So it's financial you have a question about, I can send you to somebody who's really the expert. If it's health, I can send you to somebody who has answers for that. But I'm thrilled to try and find person for you if you just even simply get a hold of me or Fred Dennis, who's the incoming chair in Chicago this year.
Yeah, and definitely I've spoken with Fred on numerous occasions as well as you, and definitely an openness to get together and lead us in the right direction. So talk about how you help your members have a long and satisfying career.
Part of it is simply networking, knowing that they can find somebody to answer their questions for among us. Like I said, sometimes you weren't taken under the wing by somebody who was your chair or something else, and it's nice to ask somebody that's been there, done that. We do a lot of that. We do a lot of webinars. Another reason that we formed the section was so that we could simply get together and talk about where'd you go on your last trip. What have you done to fill your soul with happiness, etc. What mistake did you make? And so the networking is still really important. I use the analogy that the fires burn brighter the more times you throw the sticks onto them and the more sticks you throw on. So when you get together as this group, not only can we reminisce about, quote, the good old days, we can also talk about why these can be the good old days.
I feel like hindsight sometimes is 2020 and sometimes has so much fog associated with it. As far as what's the good old days, I'm going to be looking back on this time as the good old days, but right now I'm certainly talking about all the things that could improve.
Well, the older you get, the better you were. Because you're right, hindsight can have rose-colored glasses that may not necessarily exist. Um, but again, I'm going to throw out my closing statement right now because I want you to hear it 3 times. You need to prioritize your life. And I can't tell you how successful I was recruiting to my practice for 30 plus years by simply saying that this group functions with family first, whatever makes you whole second, job third, and don't lose those priorities. What makes you whole can be anything. It can be your church. It can be coaching your kid's soccer team. It can be your marathon running. It can be lots of different things. But you need to be happy in your soul, in your own shell. And when job starts taking priorities over what makes you whole or your family, you can't help but drag that to work, and everything will drag you down. So try to keep those priorities in that lineup. Um, and again, I'll say that at the end. But I know one of the questions on the form we filled out is, what's your advice? That's pretty close to the top of my list.
Well, and that's a good point, and I think that's something that our generation really has not had uh, preached as much, or rather, maybe the opportunities aren't available. Is to keep those things to keep yourself whole. It's interesting you mentioned the coaching your soccer team because I realized a long time ago I do not have a regular schedule or the off request to be able to do that. But I've found other things. But if that really is your goal, then there are places out there that can accommodate. And sometimes, if you're really burnt out and you're struggling just to live day to day, shift to shift, you don't really have the opportunity to look at that above water. But those are still out there. And if you prioritize that, it might mean sacrificing in other ways, but I think beneficially, just for a longevity standpoint, for a long career, it's way more beneficial to find a job that you love, that you can sustain for 30 years, even if it doesn't pay as well, than to work for the really high paying, high stress, high burnout job that you can only really work until your student loans expire and then you have your exit strategy. So those jobs are out there and you really do have to find them and intentionally make those decisions.
So for me personally, I can tell you that my entire career was punctuated by volunteerism. And it's what filled my soul with happiness and helped refill my life packs and all of those sort of things. They may not have been things that paid much or if anything, but they brought me joy and they brought me fulfillment. And so those are the things that quote made me whole. And that's why I'm now the chair of the board of the Naloxone Project, which is a national organization trying to get naloxone into the communities when it needs to be there, where it needs to be, and changing federal policy, state policy, as well as distribution. That brings me joy right now, is knowing that I can continue to try and save lives at some level. And I can only tell you that, the old adage is, on their deathbed, nobody ever said, boy, I wish I'd put in more shifts. And you're right that our shifts are chaotic. They're night shifts, they're weekends, they're holidays, they're weird progressions or regressions of when you're working, etc. It makes having outside interests more challenging. But the other thing I can say is anybody that's gotten to this stage of their career has expertise that almost every organization would love to have in their organization. Believe it or not, soccer teams would love to know there was a doctor on the sidelines. Marathon runners would love to have somebody to talk to about plantar fasciitis. The bottom line is that your expertise that you have at this stage makes you valuable to almost any organization you want to be a part of. And so speak up, join, be a part of them. It'll bring you joy in the long run.
And certainly your experience over your career has given you the skills that you really need to advocate for that naloxone project, because the fact that it is where it is amazing. You have faced so many uphill battles, just from politicians not wanting to fund it to the stigma, to where it is in the community. And really it's saving lives, and it's doing so not at the bedside, but from a really national perspective. And all those battles with your colleagues to get to the chair of the board or into the hospital leadership is still being used, which is a great way to keep using your skills. And like you said, no one ever thought that they would work more shifts, or no one ever reached their deathbed wanting to work more shift. I would also add to that, no parent has ever said, gee, I wish I did more laundry when the kids were little. But really getting those skills, and I think that's something that retrospectively you'll be glad you did.
And that's one of the things. That's one of the things our section can do, is we can tell you some of those routes that we went. We can certainly help tell you, do I want to be chair of my department? Do I want to be chief of staff? Do I want to get on the ACEP board of directors? Do I want to be the chair of the finance committee in ACEP? I mean, we have people in our section that have done literally not only everything in the college, but have also done lots and myriad of things out in their communities, etc., to make them happy and sustain a 30 or 40-year career. So I would really advocate that if you have an interest, if you have a goal, you got to tell people that's what you want to do. If you don't show up and you don't tell people this is what I would like, they're not going to know that that's what you want. So show up, speak up. You've got an expertise. You deserve to be there. Although having said that, I would say listen first, then speak up.
Well, and now there's so many barriers removed. We don't have to show up in person. It's always great to do that, and that is invaluable, but we can look at the resources, join webinars, collect through email, and other ways that really remove that time and financial barrier to showing up in person, where you can still connect. And I think that's very helpful nowadays.
Yeah, one little pearl I'll share is that, I've been chair of so many different things, and part of it was when I got to be chair, I got to call the meetings. So if I had weird hours, I could say we're meeting Thursday at 2 o'clock, because that's when I can be there.
And we get to tell you they scheduled me at that point anyway.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and not many
Just
people showed up.
summarize. I'll look at it later.
Not many people showed up at 1:30 in the morning when I got off duty. But I would encourage everybody to recognize you have an expertise, you belong in the room, and people appreciate you in the room. And that's what my group wants to encourage people. Sometimes you just need to hear that you're on the right path. Sometimes you need to hear, and we say a lot of this, oh, we tried that 25 years ago. Here's why it didn't work. And it's always fresh ideas to look at, but we can tell you reasons why it didn't work 30 years ago and it didn't work 15 years ago and why we think it's not going to work now.
And we can find the way that it does work.
Well, that's the hope that, if we weren't successful at 30 and 15 and 5, that's why we still want to be relevant, is we want to help you navigate the answers that will work. I mean, God knows we didn't solve boarding. And that's something that needs to be solved. We made inroads in mental health and substance use disorder, but we sure as heck haven't cured it. And so there's lots of things out there that we still want to be a part of. Witness me.
Well, and I always told my mom I learned a whole lot from my older brother about what not to do. So if we've tried something one way, it doesn't really help to reinvent the wheel. But knowing those past experiences can really help us going forward and trying to identify those things that may have changed in this time we can utilize to our advantage.
Anyway, getting back to my section, I would just reiterate again, we have a lot of webinars that are like this that are archived at ACEP. Look through what we have to offer. Again, I'm not convinced that a lot of people are going to join this as one of their free sections right now if they're 3 years out of training, but get to know us. And we'd love to be able to tell you how to join our section on your terms when you want to.
And certainly, if you're looking for their resources, the Early Career Physician Leadership has been discussing ways to collaborate for both member benefit. So if you don't want to reach out directly to the retirement section, then reaching out to our leadership can kind of help plug you in and find those resources as well. So we are available as a networking and a connection to this section as well.
Absolutely. That's why they call it networking, because then you're not always going to get plugged into the top of the pyramid every time. What you need to do is learn how to navigate your way through the network. And starting with your own section is a fabulous place to start.
Well, Steve, to that end, I know you've prepared a statement with 3 points, so I think that needs no introduction. So tell me your recap and tell me your closing statement.
Okay, so first thing I would say is start early on your plan of your trajectory. You should have an exit strategy now. And I would really push for a financial planner to help you with that. So that would be one. Number two, I would say attendance. Show up and speak. You belong there. You deserve to be there. Listen, but know that you belong there and don't feel afraid to take on anything. You can change the world. And the third thing I just end with is remember, set your priorities. My group has been very successful for going almost on 50 years now with family first, whatever makes you whole second, job third. And don't lose that order. Job's important. You need to have it. You need to have an income. You need to have people rely on you at work. But don't let it supersede the other two.
Yeah, really great points. Now, we were talking at the beginning before this started about the differences in vision between our section and your section, both literally and figuratively. So if you want to show me the difference between ours and yours, we're more alike than we are different.
Yeah. Hey, there was a time when I was young and cool too.
Well, congrats, because I don't think I was ever young and cool at the same time. So, all right, thank you so much for speaking with me today. Once again, Steve Anderson, the early retirement section. Lots of great ways to collaborate, to really network and to stay together, to net the college as a whole, to gain from expertise and experience both sides going and coming. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Laurel. Let's explore the journey together.
All right.